He's talking good fight, so when you're lying in bed or talking love yous are doing saying, we're going to get him, we're going to get him. Well, here I am, stone cold sober. Come and get it. I don't want you'll come. You've got
These words were meant to be a warning, a threat aimed at his rivals, but they ended up being the last words of a man whose life had been defined by violence, loyalty, and notoriety. Mark Webley, a name known in almost every corner of Edinburgh, appeared in videos, daring his enemies to come at him. When they did, the events made headlines, cementing the story of a man whose reputation preceded him, feared, respected, and ultimately marked for death. This is the story of Marc Webley, a life lived in public view, a criminal career shaped by the streets, and a final deadly encounter that left an entire city in shock. Welcome to Shadow Audit, where we uncover UK's darkest criminal stories. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button, like, share, and tap the notification bell to stay connected to every unsettling case. The name Marc Webley was one that travelled easily through Edinburgh, not because he sought celebrity, and not because he had ever stood in front of a camera to explain himself. His name lived in the conversations of people who'd spent enough time around the city's edges, men who drifted in and out of prison, small-time dealers who never stopped glancing over their shoulders. Even among ordinary residents who had never met him, the name carried a quiet recognition, as though it had floated past them before in a headline or a warning whispered in the wrong pub at the wrong hour. Long before the night that ended his life, Webley occupied a strange place in the public imagination. Not quite a looming figure, but someone whose history never managed to detach itself from the present. Every few years, his face would reappear in the news, often attached to a short, blunt line about violence, courtrooms, or criminal connections. It made him feel larger than most people ever saw him. In truth, he was one man moving through a city full of others, trying to survive their own battles. But reputation has a way of adding height, shadows, and myth where none are needed. Marc Webley's story, however, did not begin with notoriety. He grew up in the rough streets of North Edinburgh, in neighbourhoods where opportunity often felt scarce and survival demanded vigilance. Streets lined with worn tenements, empty lots, and the occasional corner shop became his playground and his classroom. From an early age, he witnessed disputes between neighbours, between gangs, and between the police and the people they patrolled. That left little room for innocence. Friends and family describe a boy who was sharp, observant, and quick to adapt, traits that would later serve him well in the world he chose. The city itself, for Webley, offered lessons in power and consequence. Territorial disputes, petty thefts, and local feuds were not just stories. They were realities lived day by day. In an environment where respect could mean safety and disrespect could mean violence, Mark learned to navigate the streets with caution and confidence. By the time he reached adolescence, the pull of local gangs, with their promise of money, influence, and protection, was something he could not resist. He began moving through a world of small-time crime, gradually building a reputation that would eventually follow him into adulthood. And yet, even as he stepped deeper into that life, the early patterns of his city and his upbringing never left him. They informed the decisions, the allegiances, and the persona he would carry into public view. By the time Webley had fully entered the criminal underworld, the foundations of his reputation were already set. Those early streets had taught him to be cautious, clever, and unflinching, qualities that would both elevate him and mark him for the kind of attention that could only end one way. By his late teens, Marc Webley had already begun carving out a reputation that preceded him on the streets of Edinburgh. Local authorities and police reports described him as having more than 60 convictions spanning assaults, thefts, and other offences that stretched back into his early teenage years. These early brushes with the law, combined with ongoing rivalries and a drive to assert himself in local networks, set the stage for what would become the most serious act of his young life. By early 2005, tensions between Webley and a local rival, Peter Simpson, had escalated over a combination of personal disputes and claims of dominance in the area's underworld. The attack, however, hadn't come out of nowhere. In the weeks before, petrol bombs had been hurled at Simpson's flat. Police noted that the 19-year-old Webley was determined to seize control of the local drug trade, whatever the cost. On a cold January day, Webley rode a Kawasaki motorbike wearing a balaclava and fired 5 shots at Simpson near his home. One bullet struck Simpson in the back, narrowly missing his aorta by less than an inch, a margin that doctors later said could have meant death at 19. As Webley discharged the handgun, his co-accused James Tant pressed a sawed-off shotgun against Simpson's body. A threat that was never carried out, but a promise all the same. Media coverage at the time framed the incident as a motorbike drive-by, underscoring both the danger of rising gang conflicts and the calculated nature of the attack. The consequences were severe and immediate. Following a guilty plea, Webley was sentenced to 11 years at Glasgow High Court in 2006 for attempted murder. The sentence removed him from the streets during the formative years of his early adulthood, but also marked him publicly as capable of extreme violence, reinforcing his reputation in Edinburgh's criminal circles. Prison, however, was not merely a period of absence from crime. Within the system, Webley encountered other offenders with histories of serious violence, learning the unspoken rules of hierarchy and influence behind bars. Those who observed him during this period noted that he maintained a presence, quiet, measured, but unmistakable among those who had known him before imprisonment. Upon release, Webley returned to a city that had changed in some ways, but remained recognizably familiar in others. His early convictions and the notoriety gained from the 2005 shooting had cemented a reputation that preceded him, shaping interactions with peers, rivals, and law enforcement alike. While details of his exact movements after release are limited, it is clear that he began reintegrating into networks tied to criminal activity, leveraging old contacts and his established infamy. Following his release from prison, Mark Webley resumed life in Edinburgh with the same mix of caution and audacity that had defined his early years. While the streets had shifted during his absence, old networks, lingering disputes, and long-standing rivalries remained, immediately placing him back in the city's web of gang activity. Law enforcement and local sources observed that Webley quickly reconnected with associates and adversaries alike, his reputation preceding him and shaping the way people responded to his presence. Central to his post-prison life was his suspected involvement with the Young Mental Royston gang, a network reported to be active in heroin and cocaine distribution across the city. While Webley was never formally charged for these activities, police intelligence and local sources consistently placed him in close proximity to the gang's operations, mediating disputes, enforcing influence, and maintaining territorial boundaries. These associations immediately positioned him as both a player and a target in a landscape defined by fragile alliances, grudges, and ongoing competition for control. It was within this framework of gang-linked activity that Webley's presence and notoriety were reinforced. He was recognized by both former associates and rivals alike, a man whose past convictions and violent history gave weight to every movement. Law enforcement reports frequently noted that his involvement in suspected criminal activity, while unproven in court, made him a person of interest in monitoring the ongoing feuds and retaliatory incidents that periodically flared across Edinburgh. By March 30, 2021, Webley's alleged capacity for extreme measures was again thrust into public view. He faced accusations of a double attempted murder, having reportedly driven a car at high speed into oncoming traffic on Telford Road and Ferry Road, targeting driver Richard Hughes and passenger Lindsay McLaughlin. Prosecutors alleged that Webley deliberately collided with their vehicle in an attempt to cause a crash. He was remanded in short prison pending trial, but in October 2022, the charges were withdrawn due to insufficient evidence. While he avoided conviction, the incident kept him in the public eye, underscoring the perception of a man willing to act decisively and dangerously in ongoing disputes. Throughout 2023, Webley remained under law enforcement scrutiny, his activities reflecting a combination of recklessness, notoriety, and ongoing rivalries. In November 2023, a firearm was discharged recklessly at a block of flats, an incident later charged to Grant Hunter. Police intelligence described it as part of broader feud dynamics, highlighting the persistent threats he faced from rivals and noting that he had numerous enemies. Reports also indicated that Webley took precautions for his personal safety, wearing a stab vest on Hogmanay, a reminder of the real danger that surrounded him. That year also saw turbulence in Webley's personal life. He was accused of assaulting his ex-partner during a children's football match, a case scheduled for trial in early 2024, but postponed due to his death. In a separate incident, he headbutted his brother Don Webley, a convicted sex offender, in an Edinburgh pub over alleged harassment of a 12-year-old girl. Minor legal matters continued to accumulate as well. During February 2023, Webley faced multiple charges, including a failed breath and drug test during a traffic stop. Individually, these offenses might have seemed inconsequential, but in the context of his wider criminal history and gang-related suspicions, they contributed to a perception of constant recklessness and visibility in the eyes of law enforcement and rivals alike. By the end of 2023, Mark Webley's trajectory had become clear. His suspected ties to organized crime, combined with minor and major legal entanglements, positioned him as a figure of influence and risk in equal measure. Rivalries persisted, enemies multiplied, and his public profile remained high. Every incident, from suspected gang disputes to domestic altercations, added another layer to a life defined by both notoriety and vulnerability. By mid-December 2023, Mark Webley's life was under siege. Weeks of tension had built up across Edinburgh and Glasgow, with rivals marking him as a target. A car had mounted the pavement in an apparent attempt to run him down, a move police later linked to a £20,000 bounty placed on his head by enemies entrenched in the city's drug scene. Warned repeatedly of threats, Webley reportedly wore a stab vest, navigating the streets with caution. Yet he remained defiant. Social media videos showed him daring his rivals, taunting them with words that chilled anyone who watched. The culmination of that conflict came on New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2023, around 11:30 p.m. at the Anchorin pub on West Grant Road in Edinburgh. Webley was outside with his friend Stuart Pack Pearson when a stolen red Hyundai Tucson SUV pulled up about 15 feet away. The gunman, Grant Hunter, masked and linked to organized crime, approached, deliberately lowering his balaclava to reveal his face, ensuring Webley recognized him. Multiple shots were fired from a handgun. Initial rounds missed Webley but struck Pearson, who survived serious injuries. Hunter fired again. One bullet ricocheted off Webley's stab vest before striking fatally. Mark Webley died en route to the hospital, pronounced dead on January 1st, 2024. The immediate aftermath was chaotic. The getaway vehicle was found burned in Granton, about 4 miles away. Webley's family initially refused police cooperation, while members of the local community left floral tributes at the pub, blending grief with recognition of his larger-than-life reputation. Among the flowers, one wreath carried the words that summed him up perfectly: hated by many, loved by millions. In the days following, police swiftly acted. January 3rd to 4th, 2024, saw the arrests of Hunter, his girlfriend Emma Jane McVie, and associate Gary Robertson. They had hidden in a fortified safe house, raising alarm among neighbours as armed officers raided Edinburgh flats. Investigators linked them to broader disputes, including missing associate Daniel Fraser, feared dead. Mark Webley's death reverberated not only through his family, but also through the city's criminal underworld. In February 2024, his family held a wake celebration at Edinburgh's village hotel, blending grief with remembrance and references to Mark's personal code, including protecting children from harm. The legal aftermath unfolded over the next 2 years. Hunter pleaded guilty on November 13, 2025, to Webley's murder, aggravated by organized crime, and Pearson's attempted murder. McVeigh and Robertson admitted to perverting justice by aiding the escape and concealment of the perpetrators. CCTV footage presented at Edinburgh High Court showed the moments leading up to the attack. Hunter parking, Webley approaching with his phone, the deliberate removal of the mask, and the fatal shots. Judge Lord Mulholland described the events bluntly. The streets of Scotland are not war zones. Sentencing was scheduled for December 17, 2025, with Hunter facing life imprisonment, possibly without parole. Police described the incident as senseless violence, a stark conclusion to a life shaped by conflict, reputation, and unrelenting gang entanglements. Mark Webley's death marked the final chapter in a life defined by cycles of violence, both inflicted and received. Years of alliances, feuds, and escalating public confrontations had culminated in a moment of fatal consequence, a sobering reminder of the dangers inherent in the world he inhabited. Mark Webley's life, from the rough streets of North Edinburgh to his violent death on Hogmanay 2023, is a story defined by recurring patterns, critical choices, and their consequences. Early exposure to an environment shaped by territorial disputes, poverty, and limited opportunity set him on a path in which personal ambition and criminal enterprise became inseparable. His teenage years, marked by constant vigilance and engagement in small-time crime, forged a reputation that would persist well into adulthood. Each encounter with the law, each act of violence, and each alliance within Edinburgh's gang networks reinforced the image of a man both feared and notorious. His death on December 31, 2023, was not an isolated event, but rather the culmination of years navigating a world where reputation, loyalty, and fear dictated survival. While his life was punctuated by moments of defiance and displays of control, it ended violently, leaving a profound impact on the city, his associates, and the families affected by his actions. Mark Webley's story is both cautionary and tragic. His narrative serves as a testament to the harsh realities of organized crime, the fragility of trust, and the inevitability of retaliation when rivalries remain unresolved. If this story has drawn you in and you want to explore more in-depth true crime cases, subscribe to Shadow Audit. Hit the notification bell to stay updated with investigative storytelling that uncovers the truth behind the headlines and deep dives into the most compelling cases.